Power has never survived on strength alone. From the earliest civilizations to vast empires, rulers understood one simple truth: fear lasts longer than loyalty. Kings and emperors didn't just rule through armies or laws. They ruled by shaping the minds of their people. Fear became a language, spoken through punishment, spectacle, and constant reminders of authority. To live under an empire was not just to obey, but to remember what happened when obedience failed. In ancient societies, power needed to be visible. A king hidden behind palace walls was a weak king. Authority had to be seen in streets, markets, and public squares. Towers loomed over cities not just for defense, but as symbols of dominance. Banners, statues, and monuments reminded people who ruled them, but fear was the message that truly endured. Every empire learned that controlling the body was temporary, but controlling the mind created generations of obedience. Public displays were one of the most effective tools of fear. Executions were not hidden acts of justice, they were events. Crowds were gathered intentionally. The message was never meant only for the condemned, but for everyone watching. Each scream, each final breath was a lesson carefully delivered. People learned where the line was drawn, and more importantly, what happened when it was crossed. Fear became education, passed silently from parent to child. Kings understood that unpredictability strengthened control. Laws were often vague, punishments inconsistent. A crime might be ignored one day and brutally punished the next. This uncertainty kept populations anxious and alert. When people never knew which action might anger authority, they learned to restrain themselves. Fear didn't require constant violence. The possibility of violence was enough. The mind filled the silence with terror. Empires also mastered humiliation as a weapon. Stripping dignity was often more powerful than physical pain. Prisoners were paraded, mocked, or forced into submission before crowds. Once broken publicly, they became symbols. Their shame warned others that resistance didn't just end lives, it erased honor. In societies where reputation meant survival, humiliation could destroy entire families, not just individuals. Religion became another pillar of fear-based rule. Kings aligned themselves with gods or declared themselves divine. Disobedience was no longer just a crime against the state, but a sin against the universe. Punishment gained cosmic weight. Fear extended beyond death into eternity. People obeyed not only to save their lives, but to protect their souls. Authority became untouchable, unquestionable, absolute. Architecture itself became a psychological weapon. Palaces towered over common homes. Thrones were elevated, forcing subjects to look upward when speaking to power. Dungeons were buried deep, hidden from light and hope. Every stone was placed with intention. Even silence within these spaces carried fear. A ruler didn't need to speak loudly. His surroundings spoke for him. Empires also learned to turn people against one another. Informants were rewarded. Neighbors were encouraged to report neighbors. Trust dissolved. Fear thrived in isolation. When no one felt safe, unity collapsed. A divided population was easier to rule. People focused on survival, not rebellion. Fear made loyalty unnecessary. War reinforced this system. Conquered lands were often shown brutal examples early, ensuring submission without constant fighting. Entire cities surrendered based on reputation alone. Stories traveled faster than armies. Fear became a weapon that required no soldiers. Empires expanded not just through conquest, but through the shadows cast by their cruelty. Yet the most terrifying aspect of fear-based rule was its permanence. Even when rulers died, fear remained. Children grew up hearing stories of punishments, betrayals, and consequences. The empire lived on inside memory. Long after chains rusted and crowns fell, fear shaped behavior. Power outlasted kings because it had already taken root in the human mind. This was the foundation of empire, not justice, not order, but fear carefully engineered, displayed, and inherited. And as history would show, once fear became law, cruelty was never far behind. Fear evolved as empires grew more complex. What began as public violence slowly transformed into something quieter, more efficient, and far more terrifying. Rulers realized that constant brutality was costly and risky. Too much blood could inspire rebellion. So fear adapted. It became subtle, omnipresent, and invisible. The most powerful empires learned that the best terror was the kind people carried inside themselves. Surveillance became a silent weapon. In many kingdoms, eyes and ears were everywhere. Servants, guards, priests, merchants, anyone could be listening. Conversations lowered to whispers. Even private thoughts felt dangerous. When people believed they were always being watched, obedience became automatic. Fear no longer needed chains. It lived in the mind, shaping behavior without force. Secret enforcement units emerged to maintain this atmosphere. They operated without clear rules, answering only to the ruler. Arrests happened at night. People disappeared without explanation. No trials, no public records. The absence of information created more fear than violence ever could. Not knowing why someone vanished meant anyone could be next. Silence became punishment. Empires mastered the art of delay. Prisoners were often left waiting, days, weeks, sometimes months, without knowing their fate. This waiting was deliberate. Anticipation broke the spirit more effectively than pain. Hope rose and fell repeatedly, exhausting the mind. By the time punishment arrived, many were already defeated. Fear drained resistance long before action was taken. Control extended into daily life. Clothing, speech, rituals, and even posture were regulated. Breaking small rules invited suspicion. These restrictions trained people to constantly self-correct. Fear became routine, normal, invisible. When oppression feels ordinary, it no longer needs enforcement. People enforce it themselves. Empires also manipulated history to sustain fear. Rebellions were erased from records or rewritten as disasters. Failed uprisings were exaggerated to appear foolish and doomed. The past itself became a warning. Stories taught that resistance always ended in ruin. Over time, people stopped imagining alternatives. Fear narrowed the future. Public loyalty displays were another tool. Forced celebrations, oaths, and rituals made obedience visible. Refusal was noticeable. Absence was dangerous. People learned to perform loyalty even if they felt none. Eventually, the performance became habit. Fear trained behavior until it resembled devotion. Family ties were exploited. Punishment often extended beyond the individual. Parents were held responsible for children. Children suffered for parents. This shattered resistance instantly. When defiance endangered loved ones, fear became absolute. The state replaced trust. Loyalty to authority outweighed loyalty to blood. Economic fear reinforced control. Land could be taken, work denied, food restricted. Poverty became punishment without violence. People learned that survival itself depended on obedience. Hunger silenced dissent faster than swords. Fear of starvation proved as powerful as fear of death. Religion, law, and state merged into a single force. There was no escape route, physical or spiritual. Authority followed people into their homes, their prayers, their dreams. Guilt and fear intertwined. People punished themselves mentally long before any ruler intervened. Fear no longer needed kings. It governed on its own. Perhaps the cruelest success of fear-based rule was how it reshaped identity. Generations grew up knowing nothing else. They didn't see themselves as oppressed. They saw fear as normal order. Freedom felt dangerous. Obedience felt safe. Empires achieved their greatest victory not when enemies were defeated, but when people stopped imagining life without fear. By this stage, cruelty no longer needed spectacle. It had become systemized, quiet, efficient, and deeply rooted. Fear had matured, and it was no longer just a tool of power. It was the foundation of civilization itself. Fear was powerful, but it was never stable. The same force that built empires slowly began to rot them from within. When fear becomes the foundation of rule, trust disappears, loyalty decays, and power turns fragile. History shows that while fear can create obedience, it cannot create stability forever. As generations passed under fear-based rule, rulers grew increasingly disconnected from reality. Surrounded by silence and forced loyalty, they mistook fear for devotion. Honest voices vanished. Advisors spoke only what power wanted to hear. Warnings went unspoken. Truth became dangerous. In this vacuum, empires made catastrophic decisions, blind to the resentment growing beneath their control. People adapted in quiet ways. Resistance no longer looked like rebellion. It became subtle. Delays, silence, passive defiance, refusal to care. When fear dominates life, motivation dies. Innovation slows. Productivity collapses. People do only what is necessary to survive. Empires ruled by fear often appeared strong, but beneath the surface they were hollow, drained of loyalty and purpose. Eventually, fear reached a breaking point. When punishment became constant, it lost meaning. When cruelty was everywhere, it stopped shocking. People with nothing left to lose became dangerous. Fear that once prevented rebellion began to provoke it. History repeatedly shows this shift, the moment when terror no longer controls, but ignites. Empires often collapse not from external enemies, but from internal decay. Armies refused orders. Officials betrayed rulers. Cities opened their gates to invaders rather than endure more fear. When authority relies only on terror, it survives only as long as terror works. Once it fails, nothing remains to hold power together. In the final stages, rulers intensified cruelty, believing more fear would restore control. Executions increased, laws hardened, surveillance expanded. But this desperation only confirmed weakness. Violence became noise instead of warning. Fear turned chaotic, no longer precise. The system devoured itself. The most haunting truth is that fear never truly disappeared. Even after empires fell, their methods survived. New rulers learned old lessons. Control through fear evolved, becoming more refined, less visible. Chains were replaced with systems, public executions with quiet consequences. The tools changed, but the strategy endured. Fear continued shaping societies long after crowns were gone. Laws, borders, prisons, and hierarchies carried echoes of ancient rule. People inherited behaviors, silence, obedience, caution, without remembering their origins. The past lived on inside habits and instincts. Fear became tradition. Yet history also reveals something else. Fear-based rule always faces resistance eventually, not always through violence, but through awareness. When people recognize fear as a tool, its power weakens. Empires fall when obedience turns into understanding. Control collapses when fear is named. The story of kings and empires ruling through fear is not just a story of the past. It is a warning. Fear is efficient, but it is never permanent. It creates order, but destroys connection. It enforces silence, but erases loyalty. And every civilization that chooses fear as its foundation eventually pays the price. Humanity's dark evolution is written in these cycles. Power rising through terror, thriving on obedience, and collapsing under its own cruelty. Fear may rule for centuries, but it never rules forever.